I'm going to be doing in my little slot now is I'm actually returning to the 10 characteristics of a Hindu and trying to put my personal slant on them. You know, what do they mean to me personally as somebody who has always lived in the UK, comes from European parents, brought up as a Christian, become a Hindu. So what do those 10 characteristics mean to me, and how do they reflect on my day-to-day life? So the first thing was the belief in the Varna system. So as a Hindu, I now have much more respect for teachers, for artists, and people in these sorts of professions. So growing up in the UK, attending a girls' grammar school, we were led to believe that we were going to be the movers and shakers of the future, that really the only way to do this was in science and technology. And so although I probably wouldn't have openly admitted it, I probably had less respect for people who were choosing, you know, to study history or art, even though actually art was my best subject at school, but I didn't take it on to A-level because I thought, well, in my mind, it was a wasted subject. You know, how's that going to help me to get into one of those top ranking universities and to get onto this career path? But being a Hindu, it really has made me realize that all of these professions are equally valuable. And in many ways, actually, you know, the historians, the artists, these are the absolute protectors of a culture. And now, as somebody who is very impassioned about protecting Dharmic and Bharatiya culture, I really understand this so acutely now, the need for historians to document accurate history, the need for artists to present the knowledge within, for example, the Vedas to an audience, for those types of people who respond to sort of audio-visual stimuli, perhaps not reading. You know, these are such valuable professions, and I have so much respect for them now. And the Varna system, it makes so much sense to me. When I look at my own family, my dad is, you know, a businessman, works in plumbing. My mum is a teacher. My siblings, I have one who's very happy as a housewife, another in research. There's such varied careers, and same across my school friends, very varied careers. And it makes you realize just how different people are. They have their own natural inclinations. I could never imagine my sister, who is a housewife, she just has no interest in, you know, becoming a teacher, doing research, that sort of thing. She is so satisfied, you know, looking after her children, and that's just beautiful. And that's the way it should be, that people are driven by their natural inclinations. And when you look back in the history of, for example, in Europe and the UK, you know, the common surnames of Taylor and Smith, they came about because people, they were almost forced into the career of their parents. You know, they had to become a blacksmith. There was no opportunity for them to become anything else. They couldn't become an artist even if they wanted to. So when people are mistaking Varna for caste, it is just such a misrepresentation. It's just completely false, essentially. And my husband, he's reading the Mahabharata at the moment, a very authentic translation of it. And he has quite often sort of prompted me in the middle of reading a chapter saying, oh, look here. We have, you know, Rishi Markandeya telling Yudhishthira about the Varna system. We have Bhagwan Krishna doing the same, or we have a hunter explaining it to a Brahmin, that actually your profession, your Varna is down to your karma, your action, not to your birth. If you were born into a family of Brahmins, but you do not behave as a Brahmin, then you yourself are not a Brahmin. Whereas if you are born into a family of Shudras, but you behave as a Brahmin, then you are a Brahmin. That is the true sense of the word Varna. So the second characteristic was belief in the ashram system. And when I heard about that characteristic, it made me reflect on my in-laws. in India, in Bharat, and particularly the elderly generation within my in-law family. And because there is such a trend in India to become more Western than people in the West are, people in Bharat, I'm finding, this is my experience of the few people I know there, they're almost going in reverse to what they should be doing in this stage of their life. So in this final sort of chapter of their life, the last 25 years, they should be detaching. They should be reading the Shastras, imbibing the knowledge, learning how to detach from the world in a very peaceful way, not to fear death, because death isn't the end. It's just, you know, removal of one set of clothes in preparation for the putting on of a new set of clothes. They should be looking inwards, and yet I see more and more that this generation are becoming even more materialistic and even more attached to their family, to their friends, and to their possessions. And to the extent that they are becoming very anxious, you know, they can't get to sleep without sleeping pills. I mean, it's just quite, I find it really crazy that humans, they've so lost themselves that they don't even know how to sleep anymore. I mean, something so fundamental. And it comes about because of this attachment and this materialism. So for me, you know, the belief in the ashram system, again, it makes so much sense. The third point, or the third characteristic, is that Hindus worship cows as our mother. And I think this feeds into the bigger point, which I'll touch again on later, which is that we as Hindus, we see all of animal life, all of plants as connected and all to be respected. You know, they're not separate from humans in any way. But I'll touch on that later. But focusing specifically now on cow mata, on cows, becoming a Hindu, I really see cows so differently now. When I go for our walks in the countryside and you'll come across a field of cows, I really take notice about their sweet, peaceful nature. And I feel so moved about the protection of cows that we quite regularly, we give donations to Gau Nandi Seva in Noida, just outside Delhi. We give donations to the protection of cows who have been very badly hurt. And another thing I just wanted to touch upon talking about cows is I've recently been taking consultations from an Ayurvedic doctor, and she's really been making me realize just how important cow products are. So ghee, butter, milk, they are so good for us. But at the same time, in this Western world in which I'm living in, certainly, we have to be very careful that we balance that against the destruction, the terror, in fact, that cows are facing in this industrialized world, where they cannot move within, you know, beyond the size of their bodies. They're kept in these tiny sort of containers for their whole lifetime, treated so terribly. So within our household, we use milk very, very sparingly, and very consciously as well, you know, very gratefully. The fourth characteristic is that Hindus worship the Vedas as our mother as well. So I think the first thing I wanted to say is that people from other religions, I think they find it very difficult to understand what Vedas are, because to them, holy books are exactly that, they are books. And these are generally books that have emerged off the back of a person being on earth, you know, a person relatively recently being on earth, so, you know, the Bible, etc. Whereas the Vedas, they're more than that. They're not the books, they're actually the knowledge within books. And it's an eternal knowledge. It's not the knowledge that's been around for only, you know, 1,000-2,000 years, because that's when a certain person came onto earth. It's always been there. And if you think about it rationally, that totally makes sense, right? If there is this eternal power out there, this a god or Bhagwan, it makes sense that the knowledge is eternal as well. It's not limited to just the arrival of a certain person before which that knowledge wasn't there and people didn't have the opportunity to access it. So the knowledge is eternal, and it's not necessarily, you know, the physical book itself. It is actually the knowledge. That is the Vedas. And the important thing to say about the Vedas is there is so much scientific knowledge in there. It's very consistent with observations, with the geography of the Earth, with the solar system, with astronomy, with astrophysics. And with modern day science, we are able to validate some of these things, such as the distance between the Earth and the Sun, the fact that there is a bulge around the sort of the equator of the Earth, which in other religions, as we know, they really fall down very quickly when you try and validate them with science. And it's important to highlight that the Vedas are knowledge, and Hindus, they respect knowledge so very greatly. That is why they touch books to their forehead. It's the strongest expression of their respect for the knowledge within the book. They respect gurus, they respect teachers. And it just makes me think about, so a few years ago, after finishing my first degree, I spent a few weeks as a science teacher in a comprehensive secondary school in Essex. And I just found the children to be so badly behaved. And it comes down to the fact that they have no respect for the knowledge you're trying to teach them, and actually no respect for you as a teacher either. And that is a very terrible situation for a society to be in, and something that I hope India, that it never gets to that situation, because actually intelligence, knowledge, this is the most respected thing for Hindus. The fifth characteristic is that Hindus do not undermine any form of Bhagwan. And again, if you compare that to other religions where God is perceived as male, looking down on us and casting judgment based on what we believe in a sort of a blind belief way, Hinduism is so different from that. It celebrates every aspect of life, masculine aspects, feminine aspects, things that are very pure, scare us. We celebrate it all because that is the fabric of life. We have to celebrate and appreciate everything that is occurring to us and is part of this existence. And being a woman, it has been so empowering to become a Hindu, because you see Navratri, that the feminine is being celebrated night on night in all its different and glorious forms, from its very nurturing and calm and peaceful mother form all the way through to its very fierce and protective female form as well. So all of these characteristics of females, and in fact of people generally, are worshipped. And that is so empowering as a woman, because you don't need to feel so sort of cornered into being a certain type of woman. It's okay to be fierce at times, but it's also okay to be peaceful and calm at times. That is part of being a balanced human being. The sixth point was about that Hindus have equal respect to all Dharmic ways of thinking and living. And I think that comes down to the fact that Tattvam Asi, that we know that we are all Brahman. It's so inclusive. It's not divisive, saying if you don't believe in this way, then you're going to hell. It actually believes that Hindus believe everyone is saved. It's just that not everybody realizes that they are saved, but everyone is saved. And particularly even if somebody doesn't identify themselves as a Hindu, as long as they are leading a dharmic life, so perhaps they are advocates for good animal well-being, they give to the poor without any hidden agenda, and that's a really key point. They're not doing it to convert souls to Christianity or anything like that. They're doing it genuinely for the well-being of the animals, for the people. Then that is a person that Hindus really respect, absolutely. They will not cast them into judgment for not believing in their exact way of thinking. As I said, that's so different from the other religions. And when I reflect on some of my school friends, some are very strongly Christian, I know that they cry themselves to sleep at night because they think their parents are going to hell because they are interpreting the Bible. And as we know, there's so many different ways of interpreting the Bible, different sort of strands to Christianity. And if somebody doesn't believe in their strand, they think they're automatically going to hell, you know, even if it's their parent and they're thinking they believe something similar, but not quite the same. And that is just so sad. Whereas if you are loving and respectful and see the beauty in everyone, in as long as they are leading a dharmic life, then that is so satisfying for yourself, surely, and yeah, very inclusive for societies. The seventh point, the seventh characteristic of a Hindu being that we believe in rebirth. So when I thought about that, it made me think about mental strength, and particularly that as a Hindu, I don't fear death now, as I mentioned earlier. It's just taking off the old clothes in preparation for putting on some new clothes. I feel less pressure to achieve because I know there are multiple lifetimes now to do things in life. I haven't got to do everything by the time I'm 30 and everything by the time I'm 40, you know, so it's less pressure on me. And it also teaches you not to worry about the small details, because in the grand scheme of things, of a universe that is billions of years old, you know, the small things that happen in your life, they may seem big at the time, but in the grand scheme of things, they're really not. And probably in a week's time, they'll seem insignificant to you as well. So I find being a Hindu has really strengthened me mentally. And as I mentioned earlier, the idea that we are all connected, that we are this single consciousness, it helps you with managing other people, because you see that, yes, we're all connected, but we're all on our own individual journeys. And so when somebody reacts in a certain way or does something to you, it helps to then stand back and just appreciate that, okay, they did that. I'm not going to judge them for it. They're obviously on their journey. They need to undo their karmas in some way. I just need to concentrate on what's within my karma. And that's all you can do. So again, something that I find really strengthens you mentally. The eighth characteristic of Hindus is that we believe that we can be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. And so feeding on from that last point, again, I find it helps to realize that there is this bigger goal in life. You know, it isn't all about getting through your school exams, getting to a good career, making lots of money. That actually you have duties within different periods of your life. And yes, you do need to have your education, you do need to earn a living, but that shouldn't make you lose sight of the bigger picture, which is that you are trying to progress towards moksha. And that is why in Hinduism, knowledge is so valued, why sannyasis are so valued, because it's not material possessions or wealth, it's intelligence and knowledge that are most respected and are the goal of life, essentially. When you look at the king of ancient India, you know, they had the utmost respect for their gurus, who maybe were living very simple lives while they were living in lavish palaces. And yet when they had to go and live in the forest for whatever reason, they could do that fine, because again, they were not associating all of their status, all of their identity with their wealth, with their lavish palace. They appreciated actually being part of nature and studying the Shastras. Actually, that is a more valuable life. So they were perfectly happy living with very little in the forests. The ninth characteristic of a Hindu is that their heart melts at the thought of violence, but that they should not allow violence to themselves. And that comes back to that previous point about, you know, as long as a person is living in a dharmic way, then let them live in peace, and let me live in peace. But you know, Hindus, they do often mistake that idea about non-violence, that they think ahim paramo dharma is the full story, when in fact it is just half the story. So non-violence, yes, is the ultimate duty, but the second half is, so too is violence in the service of dharma. And ultimately that's the essence of Mahabharata and Ramayana. It's teaching us that at times you do have to turn to violence to stop dharma and to restore dharma. And that's something that Hindus nowadays, they all too often forget. You only have to look back through the centuries. There have been so many glorious Hindu warriors that have been protecting Dharma for thousands of years. So really nowadays, it really is our duty to be doing this as well. And there are so many ways in which we can be doing this. And for me, I do a lot on social media, trying to right the untruths that are written about Hinduism and trying to correct misperceptions and that sort of thing. And it's something that we all have to do. It's our duty as Hindus. Now, the 10th and final characteristic of a Hindu is that we wish well for all living beings. And that this is the point I wanted to come upon earlier when we were talking about Gaumata, that we're all part of this single consciousness, we're all connected, and that means that we automatically have respect for animals and for plant life. And it's not that us versus them sort of attitude that the other major faiths propound. And being a Hindu, it really has made me see the world differently. When I go for a walk in the countryside now, I really do have so much more awe and wonder and love for the countryside in which I'm walking. And it's made me live much more consciously about what I eat and what I do. So I'm very much more conscious about reducing my carbon footprint, because that is just the idea of karma. Ultimately, it will come back to you if you are living in a bad way and with a high carbon footprint. And I just wanted to close on this one by saying that I notice again when I look to family and friends in India that this steep growth in materialism and Western attitudes, it's kind of going against this idea that we wish well for all living beings, that there is this desire for lots of international travel, for lots of possessions, an obsession for buying lots of brands, I find, and it just isn't dharmic. And in many ways, in the West, certain sections of society, they are going far more towards living a dharmic life in this respect. And so I really hope that India realizes what it is doing, and that they can reverse that trend and embrace being Bharatiya and being Hindu again, because that is the way for a sustainable world. Aping the West really is not going to end well.